radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Good evening. How you doing? Fade to Black. That's right. Today is Wednesday, October 16th, 2024. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Let's do this, man. Very excited about tonight's show, and what an amazing week. Again, here at Fade to Black, and you can help support everything that we do around here by getting yourself a Fade to Black t-shirt. We have 2 shirts. Get 2 shirts. Get one of each. There's 2 ways to get them. You can get a Game Changer membership. The links for that are below. You can just get a t-shirt or 2 by just ordering a t-shirt. The links for that are below. And everything is autographed. Everything includes shipping. Get yourself a Fade to Black t-shirt today. Like I just mentioned, what an amazing week on the show. Monday night, we had Lyle Blackburn on with us discussing one of my favorite subjects, mysterious creatures. Last night, we had Earl Grey on the show talking about one of my favorite subjects, UFOs. Tonight, Lisa Smartt is here. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, consciousness, life after death, NDE, and the Final Words Project. This is going to be an amazing conversation tonight. Tomorrow night, Thursday, the return of Michael Schratt, another one of my favorite subjects, UFO crash retrievals. It's the hot subject right now in our community. Crash retrievals. Does our government have any craft not of this earth in their possession that they may or may not be backwards engineering? Right? That's the conversation today. So tomorrow night, Michael Schratt's going to be with us presenting his favorite cases that may or may not involve UFO crashes, retrievals, and of course, backwards engineering. All of that tomorrow night, Thursday, on Fade to Black. Okay, let's get straight to it. Next month, I'm going to Peru and Bolivia, Pumapunku, with Brian Forrester. That is November 15th through the 27th. And then I come back, the links for that are below. And then I come back from that, the Conscious Life Expo, right here in Los Angeles at the LAX Hilton. I'm hosting it again this year. This is the biggest conference in the world. And it's ginormous, and it's so much fun. It's February 7th through the 10th. 2025. Links for that are below, theconsciouslifeexpo.com, and full schedule, events, speakers, tickets, everything that you need is on that link below. Then after that is Rise of the Guardians. That is March 29th and 30th, 2025 in Sedona, Arizona. I'm going to be hosting, I'm going to be presenting, going to be hanging out, and one of the things I'm definitely going to do in Sedona is I am going to go on a UFO sky watch. So come out to Sedona, hang out with us, and then let's go and find them aliens. All right. Let's get straight to it. Tonight on the show, Lisa Smartt is with us, and the title of the show says it all. If you know the subject, the Final Words Project. We're going to be discussing, her research with Dr. Raymond Moody and what she learned about consciousness through researching close to 2,000 final utterance, final words, and will share compelling final words and what they reveal about the existence of an afterlife. We're going to be doing all of that and much more tonight with Lisa. Her links, the Final Words Project, are below. Her best-selling book, Words at the Threshold, shares their findings at the Final Words Project and offers an inspiring and conforming look at what happens to us during and after death. We're going to do all of that tonight with Lisa Smartt. She's right here. Want to welcome Lisa to Fade to Black for the first time. There she is. Lisa, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I love your intro, by the way. Great intro.
Right. You know, after 2,500 of them, if I don't have it down yet, you know, I need to go flip some burgers somewhere and get more productive. Lisa, before we get started, you get the first time guest disclaimer so we can continue with the show. So let's get that out of the way. The disclaimer is this: Lisa, it's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends. Where the conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends, but we're going to end as friends. There you go. You have to accept. You have to accept. Oh, you already did. You already accepted. Okay. Wow. Okay. Easy. That was easy. The oldest questions that mankind, well, let's go PC correct, personkind, right, has had, right, for 100,000 years, 200,000 years, since Homo sapiens sapiens started roaming this big, beautiful gem and looking up into the sky. 3 questions. Where did we come from? Why are we here? What happens after we die? Those are like the 3. You can throw in, are we alone in the universe? And, you know, but those are the 3 basics, aren't they? And that's exactly where your research goes.
Yeah. And it's not where I began. I mean, when I had no intention of being at the edge of consciousness research. I was running a literacy program in Napa, California, working with adults who wanted to improve their reading and writing skills. And then my father began to die. And I saw things as he was dying that blew me away and made me curious. But I did not walk into this wanting to discover the things I discovered. They discovered me. They came to me through the research. I walked into this as a linguist. I was trained at Berkeley in the study of language. And I was working with people who had language issues, who had dyslexia and problems processing reading and writing. That was what I did. I was a teacher, basically. I ran programs. But when my father, who was a diehard skeptic, believed in nothing, when he was dying and started talking about angels in the room and predicted the time of his own death and started saying things that were mysterious to me, like, boy, this is very interesting, Lisa. I've never done this before. When he started saying these things, well, I was trained as a linguist. So I just started writing down everything he said from the moment he started the dying process. It was about a 3-week period. He died pretty quickly. But I wrote down everything he said. And by the end of that period, I was like, oh my God, I got to learn more about what's going on here. Something is going on.
Now you look like a teacher. Not only that, and you have a great smile, by the way. But not only that, but you look like you enjoy teaching, and you look like somebody that I would want in front of me, you know, teaching me. You've got that aura. So
thank you. I appreciate
I really
that.
dig that. I'm going to make a general cavalier statement. Okay. You know I'm going to ask you a question. Who is the most spiritual person in the world?
Who?
An atheist when the plane is going down.
Amen. That's right.
That's right. I'm serious. I was wrong. I was wrong. Right. Yeah, it's really true. And I think that, and not specifically talking about your father, but there are plenty out there that think that way, right? And they go through their life and they don't necessarily ponder or dream or consider life is chemistry. Life is, you know, it is what it is, and then it's over. But I think that's the image that they want to project. Okay. It's not necessarily what they believe inside, but they've got their friends, they've got their coworkers, they've got their thing, they've got, you know, and if that's what they want to project, they can't really back off of that. So they got to write it out until Right.
But, it may be even more than that. And what it might be too, what happened with my dad, he was a PhD psychologist, very serious and rational. But when he started seeing angels in the room, I mean, those people who are going down in the airplane, they might be seeing things in those last moments, right? So because the veil gets lifted.
For sure.
So it might be even something. And my father's case, it was pretty real. I remember maybe about a week after he was in the dying process, he squeezed my hand and his eyes popped open. He said, "Oh my God, Lisa, there are angels." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Are you? And he pointed, and I was, and I thought maybe it was the medication. At first I thought, well, maybe it's the meds, right? But as I did this research, what I discovered is that, yeah, meds do affect things, but we see the same patterns of what people see and say. So if people are taking different meds, but they're all seeing and saying the same thing, then you have to think something is going on here, right?
So we're going to get into the Final Words Project. We're going to spend a lot of time there, and I am so interested in this subject. But before we get there, let me get some foundations out of you. A linguist. I'm sure that you studied etymology and languages and ancient cultures and their languages and all, and which is fascinating, right? Were you interested in consciousness and what it was or is before these other revelations happened? What was your position on consciousness?
I was interested maybe in cognition, which is slightly different. So there were two areas that interested me a lot. One, I was really interested in the difference between how women and men talk. That was sort of a very I went to UC Berkeley.
That's a lifetime of study right there.
But
when you get that figured out, get back to me. Okay?
I will. I'm still trying to work it out. And it's also, it's changed, but it's evolved in the last 50 years too. But I was really interested in that, and also how the mind processes language. And so I'm going to get even more personal. When I was in school, I did not do well in high school. I had a hard time learning things, and they had all these labels for like being learning. I think at the time they just said I had learning issues, right? So I became really interested in how people learn differently. So the way into that was through language. And so I did a lot of research into dyslexia, reading issues, and just how the mind processes language. So it wasn't quite consciousness. It was more, when you read a book, what stops you from reading faster? Why do some people jumble up words? Why is there such a thing as ADHD? And I touched a little bit upon intuition, because oftentimes people who can't process language well, like, for example, many times great musicians aren't always the best writers. So, sometimes you see that people who are very right brain, so I was really interested in right brain, left brain, and how language is processed. But like airy fairy angels and consciousness and life after death, I mean, everybody thinks that's kind of a cool topic, right? Who doesn't think, oh, that's kind of cool? But that wasn't what my life focus was. My life focus was teaching people to read better and write better. That's kind of what I was doing. I was trying to figure out why were people having trouble reading when they were bright. A lot of people who struggle to read are actually, very bright. There's like a mechanical thing. So that's what I was doing. And then, so anyway, that's the foundational piece. I was interested in one, language between men and women, and how relationships are expressed through language. And I was interested in why some people were not able to read and write, even though they were very capable and bright. And I wanted to crack that code.
Did you ponder whether consciousness was physical or non-physical? In the world of academia, in the world of academia, you're at Berkeley, great arts school, but also a great science school too,
great.
As well.
It was great linguistics, yeah.
And so there's a big chunk of the faculty there that, and I don't use bad words on my show, but I'm going to use one now. There's a there's a large chunk of the faculty there that doesn't think about consciousness at all.
Well, yeah, I think, excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah, they don't consider it. They consider it a bullshit topic because they can't see it, they can't measure it, therefore why waste your time? And then you have another chunk of the faculty there, philosophers and the arts side of things that are going to suggest that consciousness is more magical and it exists before it exists outside of the body. So what side of the fence were you on?
I think without knowing it, I never named it, but I think I was always inclined towards the consciousness was outside of the body, just my natural tendency. But for example, when I was at Berkeley, that we had one professor, James Matisoff, who didn't believe in channeling. He thought that people who did channeling, it was just them, their command of language. And he was studying language patterns and thinking it was kind of like those hypnotists that they would have at the circus or something. He was very skeptical. So he would bring these channelers to us and have us listen and analyze the language patterns and try to crack the code to see that they were fakes or, and so I was intrigued and, I was still young. So I was like, I wonder who's right. I was still open-minded and curious. But it wasn't something I had ever imagined I'd write a book about until I saw my father's own process about it. And, now I'm completely convinced. I'm totally on the consciousness side now, because once you see data and once you see it in front of you, you can't deny the data. And that's kind of where I am now.
Have you had, putting your father aside, and we're going to come back to your dad, and if he's listening right now, we'll circle back. What was his name, by the way?
Morton.
Norton?
Morton with an M.
Oh, Morton, like the salt. That's
a
great name.
And what's even weird, I'm sorry.
Did they call him Morty? Anybody call him Morty?
Morty, yeah, they called him Morty. And you know what? What's really bizarre about this whole thing is his name was Morton Felix, which means happy death, right? Mort is death and Felix. So
right. Happy. Wow, that's a trip. That's a trip. Okay, Morty, we're going to circle back to you, my man. But back to the consciousness aspect of this. When you start to understand and see the similarities and you start connecting the dots, was there an aha moment for you as you're looking at a data set? And we're going to talk about that, where you step back and went, okay, we can start here, but this shows me that there's something else going on. Did you have that aha moment?
Well, it really started with my dad talking about angels. Because I grew up in Berkeley and I wanted to believe in angels. I wasn't convinced yet. Who doesn't want to believe in an angel? I mean, really, right? Like you're talking about the people on the plane who start praying, right? We all want to believe in a higher power, an angel. So when my dad, this is my dad, right? He was the one who would roll his eyes when he'd hear people talk about rainbows and kittens and UFOs. My dad was the rationalist. So when he's looking at me and talking, and right 3 days before he died, when he said to me, 3 days left, I think it was, let me get the exact, enough, the angels say enough, 3 days left. And guess what? 3 days later, he was gone. How the hell did he know that? How did he know that?
Well, okay. So as a linguist, wait a minute. This is important here. As a linguist, is he using the word angel because he doesn't have another word to use? Is he accurately describing the phenomena? And if you look back through history, angels is just one word that has been used in this phenomena, isn't it? People struggle with the right words and they may never have used the correct one.
Absolutely. Really good point. So, one of the things Dr. Moody talks about in his books, and now something I've adopted, when he talked about near-death experiences, what he said everyone shared is they would say there were no words for it. There are no words for it. And the word that he uses is ineffable, right? You can't grab it. You can't put it into words. And, one of the qualities of end of life language is it's non-referential. So what I mean by that is when my dad said, I've never been through anything like this, or this is so interesting, I've never experienced anything like this, I was like, Dad, what's the this that you're talking about? Right. So just like the angel, I would not be surprised if you're absolutely right, that there is something that is just energetic, but the closest thing he could attach it to is angel. Right. I mean, I'll probably know it's aliens, like you were talking about UFOs. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Right. Who knows?
Well, fairies, leprechauns, right? The troll under the bridge, aliens, little grays, angels, demons, whatever, ghost, right? These are words that people and cultures have used over millennia because they're the only bullets in the gun, right? It's the only weapons in the arsenal. It's the only words in the vocabulary. And to one culture, it's an angel. To another culture, it's a fairy in the woods.
Right, exactly. And that's why some people might see Jesus before they die, if that was something that was really part of their belief system and their culture. But other people might see a rabbit, a big rabbit. I'm not kidding, a warm, fuzzy rabbit, So it's all has to do with the filters with which we see the worlds, and that shapes what we see and what we perceive and what we speak about. So remember you were talking earlier on, I think it was in your intro, about the variation of experiences, or maybe it was after the intro, but about how there are so many ways and so many types of ways that people experience consciousness and NDEs. And there's no one way. Oh, maybe this was even before the show. You and I were talking in kind of the green room, but people have very different experiences of NDEs. I mean, Raymond Moody found certain patterns, but we do see the world through a certain filter. So when I looked at how people talked about their experiences at the end of life, you hear different things. You don't hear the same darn thing. It's not, the same person stands at their bed that takes them over to the other side. People have, and some of those experiences are scary. Some people talk about the men in dark black suits. There was several people who talked about kind of like the guys in black suits, and some of them, it wasn't really scary. It was more like funereal, like a funeral. So anyway, yes, I agree completely with what you just said about.
Who is the dude with the wraith? Death.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, Death.
What's his name? Is that his name?
Yeah, the angel of death, or is there another? Yeah, there. Right. I can't. Yeah, I can't.
So people would tie that image to it, and then it kind of goes back to, and you're right, it's the foundation of your belief system and how you were raised. And once that starts at birth, it's hard to break those chains because of the indoctrination, right? That happens at such a young age. Some call it dogma, which reminds me of the movie Dogma. I don't know if you've seen it. It's hard to get. Well, in that movie, it's a comedy by Kevin Smith, and it's great. But anyway, in that movie, which is about the Catholic faith and angel, and it's hilarious. Anyway, God turns out to be a woman played by Alanis Morissette.
Yes.
Okay. And so at the first sight of this, what? God is a chick? That's the statement in the movie. Well, that's exactly what you're saying, right? It's whatever your belief system is, and then you're stuck in that, and then you find out something different, and suddenly you have a paradigm shift. You almost don't believe what you're seeing.
Well, yeah, and just to contrast my father's experience and my mother, both of them were atheists. They didn't believe in God. They were, believe in love and good, very Berkeley kinds of things, but they didn't believe in the God or anything. And my mother, very close to her dying, said, Lisa, I saw him. I'm like, who, Mom?
What?
I saw God. I'm like, Mom. She said, yeah, look, we got along very well. He called me Suzala, and we got along. I'm like, Mom, that's amazing. You saw God. Tell me more. And she said, well, he wore a little mustard colored sweater like your father, and his name is Herb. I said, Herb, that's wonderful. And she said, yes, she wanted you to know that you're not going to be single forever. You need to marinate a little more. And when you're 64, you're going to meet someone. Well, what can I say?
Really?
No shit. So it actually happened. But her experience, it wasn't like there are angels in the corner of my room. It was like Herb was like this guy with a little mustard sweater, So, what can I say about that?
His name is Herb.
Which could, maybe it might be a reggae thing. I don't know. No.
That's even better. It's even better. Herb had a bong. So the Final Words Project, you and Dr. Moody created together, right? Now, if we look at, was that a ghost? What was that? I saw a dude and the door move at the same time. And there was a reflection. Wait a minute, but then who's in the mirror? There it is again. Okay.
Talk about great timing. That's actually
it was cool. It was cool.
That was cool. Actually the guy that Herb told my mother about when he said marinate, because that was the man I actually met.
I kind of peed on myself a little bit. It was pretty bizarre. It came out of to have a data set of a subject like this, because you have a data set of around 2,000 cases, and I would say
utterances, just so you know. Yeah.
Okay, that's a big data set. Of scientifically, science-wise, if you're going to study something, it's a pretty broad data set to extrapolate information from, isn't it?
I felt pretty good about it. Yes. I mean, I felt it was enough for me to be pretty confident about my conclusions. Yes.
Did you, okay, this is elementary. It's kind of fundamental. But spreadsheet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Okay. Tell us how you started to put it all together, and what were Raymond's goals?
Great question. I met Raymond Moody after my father passed on, and I became obsessed with final words. I went up to UC Berkeley, and I talked to some of my old professors who were still there, and they all looked at me cross-eyed like I was crazy. And no one seemed interested in sponsoring or working with me on work, and in research. And then a few weeks later, very coincidentally, I ran into a friend of my mother's who knew Raymond Moody and was going to be co-teaching a workshop with him. And said, why don't you come and meet Raymond Moody and bring these questions? I got my tax return also soon after. There were like a series of synchronicities. And I went to this 5-day workshop with Dr. Moody in Alabama. And the 4th day, he started to talk about his research into nonsense. And what people don't know is he has 2 degrees. One is a degree in philosophy, where he specialized in nonsense and like Dr. Seuss nonsense kind of language. And he also is an MD. So he said in the middle of this seminar, he said, I'm looking for a linguist or someone who might be interested in studying final words with me. And he started talking about his ideas about unintelligibility and nonsense. And that's how I began the work with Raymond. Can't remember the first part of your question. Try me again on that.
How you decided? Yeah. To you have to have a method put together, right? And
right.
Something like this, a spreadsheet, makes a lot of sense. Oh, I wanted to mention this to everybody. Dr. Raymond Moody, his when we talk about NDEs today, and now it's a common term. I think it's also overused, by the way. But he coined that term. That comes from Raymond Moody, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was really honored to work with him. I went to the seminar described, and the first few days he talked about the near-death experience. He was the doctor who was open-minded enough that when he heard patients come back from being resuscitated and they'd start describing these experiences, while the other docs were rolling their eyes and saying the person's crazy, he was the first one. And what he started to do is everyone was saying, this is nonsense. He's talking about nonsense. And he wrote down everything people said. And like me, he had a respect for language. And he started writing down people's nonsense. And guess what happened? Enough of writing down those things, patterns began to emerge. And so we did the same thing with the Final Words Project. When you track what looks like nonsense, guess what? If you approach it with the attitude of something is going on here, there's some kind of pattern. If you honor, we have an idea of what nonsense is, but if you get all your ideas out of your mind and just start tracking them. So I started tracking things. He had identified 76, I think it's 76 types of nonsense. He went in his PhD work when he was young. So I went through all those and I started collecting the data, and very quickly certain patterns began to emerge. So as we created those spreadsheets, at the top of the spreadsheet, there were certain types of nonsense that seemed to appear over and over again. And that's how, we started with a whole lot of possible categories, but quickly it was like, no, this type of nonsense is not showing up. This type of nonsense isn't, but these are showing up over and over again. And that's how the patterns were identified and became the foundation for the Final Words Project and my book.
And I find it interesting because the two of you have a different academic track behind you, right? Two different approaches to everything, but that's exactly why this project works. Mm-hmm. You have him, you being a linguist and a study of the final words, you're perfect for that, to give to him what the insight that he wouldn't have. And he's an MD, right? And he's dealing with these near-death experiences and the idea of nonsense. He's the perfect addition for you for this research. The two of you just happen to be there at the same place at the same time.
Yeah, it was definitely an incredible match. And, the moment we met each other, we were like, we got to work together. I had a good county job. I had great benefits. I was, doing well, running a literacy program. And I just knew in my heart that I was called to do this work. And when Dr. Moody, who is internationally known, is the most brilliant person I've met in my life, when he invited me to work with him, I was very, very lucky that I was able to. My wonderful daughter, who was like 17 at the time, said, "Look, Mom, I'll take care of myself here. I'm fine. You go to Georgia." And my husband at the time and I jumped into our car and drove out to start a life researching final words. And I studied at the foot of the master with Dr. Raymond Moody. And what a great 10 years it was.
Okay, now it's time to dive in with both feet. And let's start here for everybody so we have our foundation and understanding. What is the Final Words Project?
The Final Words Project is Raymond and I just decided we wanted to collect as much data as we could to better understand people's end-of-life language and to determine what kind of patterns there might be and what we might discover about consciousness and maybe an afterlife, or however you want to describe continuation of consciousness. What we did is I had a website where people could just submit data. We also went to hospices, asked people to keep a log at home to write down their loved ones' words. We decided not to use videotape recorders for a lot of ethical reasons, which we could talk about later. But we know that there are a lot of deathbed confessions, and we knew that we didn't want to screw around with those deathbed confessions. So we didn't feel that it wasn't ethical to have the recorders. So we talked to hospice nurses, family members, the dying. We did some collaborating with other people who were doing research in other programs. So that's what the project was. And we landed up ultimately with 2,000 utterances or phrases. We call them utterances. Some are complete sentences. Some might just be, fragments or long sentences. We call those utterances. And we just started categorizing them and sharing our findings with families and helping people better understand what was going on with their loved ones at the end of life. And for most people, it made the whole process less scary, less frightening.
Now, how were there any criteria established with that, or was it just the last thing that anybody said? It could have been the day before they passed or the minute before they passed, right? It's just merely the last thing that they said while they were alive.
No, great question. People don't, it's not like, oh, I'm going to die tomorrow at 3:45. We would never be able to really figure out when is going to be that last utterance or whatever. So, whenever people were willing, when their loved one was at hospice or whenever I connected with them, they would start recording, or some people would do it retrospectively. Their father died and they had remembered what they said or had written it down. So, I am the first to say it wasn't fully scientific because it wasn't completely controlled in how we got the data, but we got it in different ways. But no, some of the transcripts that people kept were over several weeks. And that's where we got some of the best and most interesting findings, where when people kept a log of what their loved ones said over several weeks, because what you hear are something called that I call sustained narratives. And many times as people are dying, they'll tell a story over a several week period that might start something like, well, I got my bags packed. What is he talking about? Then the next day he might say something like, yeah, well, now I'm headed over to the platform. Oh, grandpa's crazy. But when you go look day after day, it makes a story over time. Maybe 3 days later, so I think I'm supposed to stand over there on that platform. And what happens is over time, you see this thing again that I call a sustained narrative. Now, if you didn't track what they were saying over a period of time, you would just think they were talking about random craziness. But you actually see a story develop. And oftentimes it has to do with travel, which is one of the main themes we see at end of life.
Yeah. Did anybody have to take a number?
I love that.
Right. It's like I just watched Beetlejuice. By the way, have you seen it? The new one. It's on pitch. Yeah, do it. I know what you're thinking. Just listen. Why it's really good, and a really good ending too as well. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how great it was. Wow. I went into it, Lisa. I'm not going to lie. I went into it going, this is a waste of my time. I love the original movie. This is going to be bogus. I got to tell you, yeah, it might be better than the original. It's really good. But it reminds me, but what you're saying there, the travel part, like defending your life, right? Or this aspect of it. There's a lot of people that depart this planet, this version of us every single day. That's a lot of souls. That's a lot of life reviews, and there's got to be some kind of organization. I would think. I like that. I need to go over to this platform. I want that to happen. I don't want there to be nothing. Give me a line to stand in.
A lot of people are talking about it. People are talking about their passports. I mean, one of the things, and there have been other, there's a book called Final Gifts by 2 hospice nurses. And this is a finding they also shared. They also wrote about this, that one of the most common metaphors at end of life is people are talking about traveling. And they say things like, I need my passport, or let's see. Yeah, I'm stuck between 2 countries. I'm here, but I'm there, and I need my passport. Let's see. Yeah,
Wow.
no,
Wow.
it's
Wow.
amazing. Or like
Wow.
yellow bus, man, there's the bus. Who's driving that bus, Grandma? Not sure, but there are a lot of angels, a lot of angels. So it's so typical. I mean, and then when I start talking people in other languages, just because we've only begun the cross-linguistic, in other languages, people are talking about taking airplanes or the airplane coming. So one of the most common themes is this thing about a trip is on the way. I'm getting ready to travel. So going back to this idea where there were some people where they kept a sustained narrative, or they kept a log. Oftentimes it had to do about a trip coming up and preparing for it. One guy talked about a boxer, a champion fight. And they were waiting for the boxing champ to come. And because, that's who he was. A lot of times the metaphors that show up in end of life reflect who the person is, right?
Oh, that's fascinating. Do you remember, not to do another Hollywood metaphor or comparison, Heaven Can Wait, Warren Beatty,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I've seen a few Heaven movies. I'm trying to remember. Tell me a little bit.
It's the Warren Beatty one. It's like 1972,
Yeah.
and he's a quarterback for the LA Rams. He dies, but anyway, so his first experience is in heaven. He's floating in the clouds. Right? They're boarding a plane. And he's like, "Where are we going?" And he goes, "Hey, it's over, man. Don't you know where you are? You gotta check in." No. Well, again, that's a traveling situation. Yeah, very interesting. What about I want to set this up for after we come back from the break. Did you have a few other considerations here? Demographic breakdown, age ranges, men and women, obviously children or adults, and continents and cultures. So let's start with ages. Did you have an age range that you wanted to stay within?
Honestly, this is a pilot study. It's never been done before. And it was hard to get data at first. People looked at us at first kind of, cross-eyed, like, so in the beginning, we really left it open. So we did not control for the data. And now, I've talked to people who are in college, graduate students, and people now are beginning to refine the process. So this was very informal. It was a pilot. It was the first time really this had been done. So we just left it wide open, but it was interesting because predominantly it was older folks. We did have some children. It was really fascinating to compare the differences between children. I mean, as some of us might feel intuitively, children seem to be closer to heaven. They seem to, really, oftentimes the kids would be saying things to like, "It's okay, Mom, there's a ladder right here. I'm going to be taking that ladder up. Don't worry. The angels are waiting." A lot of times the kids were giving their parents reassurance, and they were seeing things in very simple terms. I'll get my notes during the break of some of the things children have said. I don't want to misquote them, but yeah.
Okay, so do you have a general percentage breakdown of the ages, like so many below the age of 10, or was it a bell curve?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Great question, and no, I didn't, and that'll be something I'll do as soon as I get off the call tonight. It's a really good point. No, didn't do that.
Well, the biggest data set's going to be older people, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I would say just intuitively, I would say 85%. But we did have some younger. We had one guy who was 21, dying of a brain tumor, and some of his words are really fascinating because he was very religious, and he made a reference right before he died about this time I chose to die at 21. And the minister said, "This time?" And he said, "Yeah, this time," like referring, implying that there were many other times. And I thought that was really interesting because remember we were talking about how the way someone was brought up culturally might shape what they hear and say, but also sometimes people have revelations that aren't what they expected. And we do hear that people talk about many lives and not just one. And that was one case with this one young man who was 21. And his minister was the one who reported to me what he said at the end of life.
Were most I preloaded your answer. That was wrong. How many were okay for the moment, right? And how many were there some that were angry and didn't want to check out?
Yeah, great question. First of all, again, this is skewed data because, if you're a loved one, you're not really going to want to come running up and give the data of your father screaming, help me, I don't want to go. Very few people, do you know what I'm saying? People want to share, my father saw angels, my father experienced God or whatever. So it is definitely, again, skewed. However, we did get some really fascinating times when people are like, I'm really scared. People, not everyone. Thomas Edison said, "Oh, it's so beautiful," or what did Steve Jobs say? "Oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow."
Right.
But not everybody, everybody says that. One guy, his father was that he was really angry, and he was like, "I'm the master of my ship," he was like saying, "I'm not going to do it," and then his very word was like, "Bull."
Right.
And so, yeah, people do. Not everyone. I mean, I wish I could say everybody died at peace, but not everyone does.
Well, I mean, what family's going to come forward? What were his last words? "Oh, the fire, it burns." Right. Right. "Oh man, you're guarding the gates of Hades." Ah! Who's going to, right? No, I get that. I understand that.
Right.
But did you get a Hades comment?
Good question. I really didn't, but I have heard that with near-death experience research. We have heard, sort of hell realms. Even Eben Alexander, for as beautiful as his depiction was of the afterlife, he went in the beginning of the book kind of through this wormy, weird kind of space.
Well,
yeah.
if you look really closely at a Hieronymus Bosch painting, that dude went there. He went there. He saw it. He saw it and remembered it, came back and painted it. And a little bit in What Dreams May Come too as well. It's a pretty frightening spot to be in. But like Hieronymus Bosch, to have somebody describe something like that, that's what we don't want. We all want unicorns, right? And My Little Pony,
right.
and that, right? Yeah. You want to be cool with it. So back to.
But I do have to say, excuse me again.
Well, I was going to say, how much of it was spiritual? I understand the angels part, but how much of it was a spiritual enlightenment?
A lot of it is, and one of the things I wanted to say to you about the part that is reassuring to me, and there's been research by Christopher Kerr at Buffalo. They've done, I think they had 500 patients where they actually videotaped the people as they were dying, is, people have these takeaway characters, and a very high percentage, like 70 to 80% of people right before they die will say, "Oh my God, there's Mark, my husband or my sister," that they have these people who come to their bedside who are familiar, to take them away. And at the very end, a lot of people will say, "It's Susan." And that was one thing that is, even if, it does seem that some people have this hellish thing. One of the things that's kind of reassuring to me is that there are these takeaway characters, and that other research has documented it through videos, that, people see someone taking them to the other side. And also we know with near-death experiences, right, people go through that tunnel and they meet the predeceased, the people of their lives take them across. So, I find some reassurance in that. And who knows why? That would be an area of research. Why do people have a more hellish experience? It's not about someone did a lot of drugs and rock and roll. It's not that. It's not that. What we know about the being of light or God, it doesn't seem at all like that that entity is judging us for our mistakes. It really doesn't. So I don't know. It's a mystery. That's an area I would love to know more about, like the people who do fight against death. And my mother, actually, my father had this very kind of idyllic, beautiful death. My mother, she went through these periods where she thought the caregivers were trying to kill her, which is kind of ironic because she was dying, but she was, really paranoid and and what's so funny, and my father in real life was this really like cigar smoking, tough kind of guy. He was rational, but he was like, kind of like, it was in New York. And he was, my mother was like, kind of, yeah. And at the end of life, she kind of got more in touch with more dark kinds of things, and my father kind of released to something more beautiful and angelic. So who knows? It's a mystery. It's something that I certainly can't speak about definitively, but it's a question.
I often wonder if somebody's religious beliefs are changed very quickly. Right? Maybe they're Buddhist, right? Maybe they were born and raised with Tibetan monks, or something else completely different. Not with the body of Christ, right? And then suddenly switch over, or go the other way, right? Maybe they go I don't know. Hindu is the right way, or whatever. You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
To have these revelations so close. Yeah.
But, more and more when I hear from people from NDEs, and also, for example, one person said, I am the great I am, right before they died. And a lot of what people are talking about is many are less about dogma and denominations. It's more about, not to sound corny, but it is more about love. People are talking more about love. And there's this period of time before people die called terminal lucidity. There's like something called terminal lucidity, where people become very lucid right before they die. And often that's a time where they become very lucid, even if they were not lucid before. And at those times, they look for forgiveness and they ask for forgiveness. So it seems, from what I've seen and heard, that love is, this sounds so corny, but I can't help myself, but love
it's true. It's true.
It's true. It's more about love or light. And it's not so denominational. I talked to one person, this was more with an NDE, but he was a Mormon, and he was a Mormon through and through. But after his NDE, he came back and he said, it's not about denomination. It's about love and good deeds. And that.
Well, he was a Mormon. He's easy to flip. That's an easy flip right there. Get a Mormon to go in any direction. How to Offend People by Jimmy Church. That's my next book. Oh, man. Oh, geez. Okay. On a serious part of this, though, the ability to look at what people have sent you is one thing. Did you have the opportunity to go to a hospice and sit with somebody at the end of life?
Oh, yeah. Many people, when it felt, yeah. I'm not many, but yeah. It's so funny because I remember when I first started this research, one night I woke up in the middle of the night and I actually got this kind of like, in the very beginning, like this icky feeling, like, what am I going to be doing? I'm going to be studying dying people. Like, I'm just going to be honest. And part of me was like, ew, that's gross, icky. But as I sat near, at more and more bedsides or several bedsides, there's such a sense of mystery. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it, but for me, there was such a mystery and intrigue, and people start talking, as I mentioned before, in certain kind of metaphors. Even I keep referring to my dad, and I'll talk about others too later on, but he said there's so much so in sorrow. And he started talking like poetically. And when you walk into that, oftentimes there's this kind of, when you walk into the room after someone's been born, there's like this magical kind of vibe about it, or at least, after a child's been born. It's also messy and all kinds of things, but there's a magic, like the portal is open. And a lot of times when someone's close to dying, it is messy, and all that, but there's something magical in it too. And so I went from feeling, when I first started doing this research, like, ew, icky, dying people, to like, what's this sacred thing that's going on here? What am I going to hear today that's going to surprise me? Like those sustained narratives, or that I talked about, those stories over weeks that I would have never known about had I not done that research. And people say things like, white butterflies are coming out of your mouth. They're beautiful. You hear things like that and you think, whoa, and some of it's morphine, some of it's the drugs, but some of it is consciousness, right?
So your dad was of clear mind up until the end?
He was of clear mind. He was a very clear mind, and till the day of his death. And of course, as we know, a lot of people, that's not the case. That's the other.
I just went through this with my stepfather 4 years ago, and brain tumor, right? And so he came home. Okay, so I flew back. This is in Ohio, and I flew back, and hospice, the hospital, they came, they set up a bed for him in the downstairs office, and well taken care of, that part. But out of great respect for him, I'll say this: I didn't dig it, and I didn't dig. Having to dig is the wrong word, but everybody understands what I'm saying. I didn't appreciate putting the family through that. So here we are in the next room. There's 10 of us, 12 of us, right? In the next room, all sharing memories, as we should, right? And talk, and doing our thing. But we're on this death watch. And it didn't sit right with me. And he wasn't of clear mind, right? And that part kind of, it's not like I could go in there and have a conversation with him. It wasn't happening.
Right. Were any words coming out? Because a lot of times they're not, right?
You know what? It was, I'm going to leave it just lie right there. The answer is no.
Yeah, and that's common.
But I was trying. We all were, right? And I thought to myself, man, I hope my brothers and my mom aren't listening right now. Because I was hoping that everybody would stop trying to talk to him.
Right on.
Right. Everybody's trying to get his last words out. Right. Everybody's trying to, trying to be the person that he says, what's up. And and plus I didn't want to see him in that state either. And it was rough, man. That was a rough 4 days. So well, I got no last words out of him. I got no enlightenment.
No, but I really appreciate what you're saying, and I think it's important to say it, because the truth is, at the very end, people aren't going to talk, and so it's kind of a misnomer. Final words. It's usually, some people do, a few people, but what you're saying is right on target. That's why I wanted to make it clear earlier on. These are in the last few weeks or last week, and sometimes people do get that last thing. My mother did get a thank you, but that's not, it's not the rule, really, because people are already passing. So where you get the really rich language is as they're passing, right? And in the days before, and also, come on. Sometimes we don't even know what to hear for someone's dying, right?
It was tough, so it was 4 days, and I had to fly back to Los Angeles. And so I went in early in the morning, it's like 5 a.m., 6 a.m. And I shut the door and I spoke to him.
Yeah.
Now, what I said, that's between him and I. And I remember I walked out. I didn't say anything. I grabbed my bags. I wasn't talking. I get in the car. My mom's driving me, and we weren't talking all the way to the airport. I was just thinking about this over and over again. And my mom says, "You all right?" And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not."
Yeah.
You know, and so and that was it. My mom dropped me off. She knew, right? And that night, Lisa, trip on this. That night, I did the show. I did Fade to Black, and I was. It was after the show. It was late. It was like 2 a.m. and my eyes popped open.
Mm.
They did. They popped open, and my mom called. Yep. And it was wild. And yeah.
I got to tell you, yep, it's an incredible story, and thanks for that. And it's really important. I have a story. You made me think of one of the stories from my book. There was a woman who had great communication with her mom. They used to talk a lot. And then when her mom went through the last week or so, she stopped talking. And this woman was heartbroken because she lost that connection that was so precious to her. And but one day she just sat and she went into meditation. She just got really quiet and just imagined she was talking to her mom. She didn't really hear her, but she just imagined she was telling in her head things. And so later on that day, the nurse comes in and kind of checks and says, "Well, Mrs. Sampson," or whatever, "do you want some lunch? Do you want some lunch?" And the woman opened her eyes and said, "Oh, I've had the most amazing conversation with my daughter today. Thank you." So who knows? Did the mother hear her? We know from Eben Alexander and other people that on the other side, language is telepathic. So, and we also know that people before they die, that's the last sense to go is the hearing. They hear everything. They hear everything that we say verbally, but also I believe people are hearing us telepathically. I think your stepdad heard you, but yeah. Wow.
Eyes are closed and things like that, but hearing is going to be there. What about we've got to head to a break, but let me ask you this really quick. What about, and I believe this to be part of the case. Okay, before I ask the question, I got a little disclaimer there. What about adrenaline and DMT?
Yeah.
What about the release of that and your brain surging and your body surging and the brain activity that occurs from that?
That's one theory, right? But would that really be enough? Oh my God, would that be enough to sustain? For example, there's something called terminal lucidity, where people have this real bright period of lucidity before they die.
Right.
And one person, his mother had Alzheimer's. She was in a coma. She was completely not there at some point. She came out of it right before, a few days before she died. And she said, "John, I want to let you know where all the financials are. They're in the third drawer down in my office," so on and so forth. It was exactly right. Now, how the hell is that just a surge of adrenaline, right?
Right.
That's my question, is how are things like that? So, I understand that theory. It's a good one. I'm open to exploring it, but there's just too much in terms of the thought processes. And we're talking complicated thought processes. Like even, I keep referring to the sustained narratives, but or seeing your loved one at your bed to take you to the other side. There's too many things that, to me, involve too much cognition, too much brain.
Well, that's why, Lisa, it's not a debate. We're not having a debate, but I am suggesting another idea here.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Absolutely. But we're also talking about another dimension, another parallel reality that exists out there that we don't experience necessarily while we are in this 3D state of life.
Agreed.
And so when this event happens, your brain is trying to process this other dimension and construct it so you understand it. Some people see a a light at the end of the tunnel. Me, I saw a table and chairs, right? Or whatever it is. Your brain is trying to, and that's what DMT does, right? DMT is trying to, it's showing you another reality, but your brain is trying to construct it.
Right. But the idea with DMT is that that's it, and then we're done, right? Is that what you're suggesting? Is that there is no or because I mean, it's possible that DMT is part of the shift in consciousness, and consciousness still continues.
Right. Yes. Bing, 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 ding, ding,
okay.
ding.
Yeah. I mean, that would account for some of the things that you see at the end. I mean, why is there? So I could buy that. If you were saying that's where it ends and there's nothing else, I would be like, I don't know.
No. DMT is helping you not only, well, it's not a transition because it's all continuing.
Right on.
Right. But DMT is allowing, because DMT is created it's in our liver, it's in our pineal gland, right? It's in our body. And I don't know if you've done it. You should if you haven't. Just words of advice there. It's okay. It's 5 minutes in and out, Lisa. You're safe. You're okay. But the fact that it is inside of our body, and the descriptions that so many people have at end of life seem so fantastical. But to me, it makes a lot of sense. It's not fantastical at all. It's another dimension. It's another plane of existence, and your brain is trying to make sense of it all.
That's beautiful. Well, Raymond Moody talked a lot about how when we do speak nonsense at end of life, it's sort of like we're switching channels. You know how static is when you're between two channels, you're moving, and it's like, and then finally, and then it becomes clear again. And he suggests, and I love this idea, that part of the nonsense we hear from people as they're dying, and the stuff that, is like, what the F are they saying, is there's this like channel switch. And the DMT, to me, could be part of that process going on. I mean, and also the heightened lucidity that we've talked about earlier. So, I'm open to it. Sounds great. I'm certainly not going to disagree. As I mentioned before, the only thing I would disagree with is that it's just DMT, then it's over, because I'm convinced.
No. So when you come down to Southern California, okay, when you come down to Southern California,
yes, sir.
I'll get that all set up.
All right.
I'll get that all set up. What's another? It'll be with the PhD. It's a nice environment. You'll dig it. But let's take our break right here. We're going to get back to the Final Words Project. Our guest tonight, Lisa Smartt. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this short break. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 T-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black T-shirt today. Go Backley Tappy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Lisa Smartt is with us. We're talking about the Final Words Project. And Lisa, okay, so having a situation where somebody is terminal and you have the opportunity to do this, that's one thing, whether it's friends, family, you, doctors, caregivers are there to record these last words, final words. But then there's the last words for something that you can't prepare for. You know, somebody in an accident, or you know, something else where it is sudden. Somebody's last words in an ambulance on the way to the hospital. Are those different than the final words that are studied in a more prepared situation?
Yeah, again, we haven't done enough in-depth research for me to say conclusively, but oftentimes they are different. Many times they're more nonsensical, because I think it's the brain is just literally kind of like in shock, and that transition is just not as smooth. But do you remember Sam Kinison, the comedian, and when he got
I worked with Sam for years.
Yeah, so you know that he got in an accident, and he was pretty lucid in the words he said. I don't have the exact words; they're in my book. But he had an accident, but he was pretty darn lucid at the time of his accident. And I had, that he was one of the people that I just had recorded from other people. But I think the little bit I've seen that in accidents, it does tend to be more nonsensical and more jumbled. So it's sort of what you would kind of imagine intuitively. Yeah, but I can't say conclusively. We don't have enough data for that.
You mentioned, I pulled up, I want to talk about your project here, but I pulled up 50 famous people's last words, right? And some of them are pretty interesting. And we'll touch upon some of those. But you mentioned to me earlier Bach's last words, and what were they?
Don't cry for me. I go where the music is born.
Really?
And I researched that a lot to make sure it wasn't just some pretty. Isn't that beautiful? Said? I mean, and and I wanted to make sure it just wasn't because sometimes they'll have these little pretty little sayings that they'll attach to someone that they're just doing it because it's a romantic, But I researched it, and it seems it was pretty accurate that he said something very close to that, if not that. So yeah, pretty. What do you think of that?
Remember what I told you earlier, but we'll keep that private. But composer Gustav Mahler's last word, last words. You know what?
I don't know.
Mozart.
Wow.
That was his last word. Yeah.
Wow.
Very, very, where the music is made. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay. What are the commonalities as you put the data set together? Do you see commonalities? I'm sure you have, but what are some of them?
Well, first you see metaphor show up frequently. We talked a lot about the metaphor of the travel or the trip, of traveling. That's big. But the other kind of metaphors is that people start talking about their lives. So, for example, the dancer, Jeffrey Holder. I just want to make sure I get this accurate. Jeffrey Holder, he was a choreographer, and his son wrote these down, tracked them for us. What he wrote, he was a dancer, and as he was dying, he said, 2, 3, 2, 3, arms 2, 3, turn 2, 3, swing 2, 3, down 2, 3, and then he died. Right. So right before, he was someone who did have words very soon before he died. Or Anna Pavlova, who was a well-known dancer, get my swan costume ready. So oftentimes as people die, they'll gravitate, they'll use words that refer to their identity. I call them signature metaphors that relate to the person's identity. My father used to carry boxes for my mother. She was an artist, and he would carry her boxes to art shows. And, when he started talking about the boxes he was carrying to the art show. Right. So anyway, so people use these metaphors that have to do with their lives. One that I really loved was this one woman described her father was a contractor. And as he was dying, he was like, oh, wow, so many kitchens and bathrooms. He was like, they have all these kitchenettes over there, miles and miles of them. And so, but I would never talk about kitchenettes the day I don't think when I die. And that's not going to be my metaphor, right?
One of the things that I have noticed over the years, and even prepping for this show with you this week, where I went and read so many different accounts of people's last words. One of the things that I noticed, and even Alexander talks about this too, is butterflies.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? So Vladimir Nabokov, who famous author and everything, and his last words, and I made notes of this. His last words, and then he passed, was, a certain butterfly is already on the wing.
Ah, gorgeous. See, isn't that incredible?
Isn't it? It is, isn't it? And what did Eben Alexander? You remember one of the parts of his journey was, now I'm going to have to speak in metaphor because he says it so elegantly and so well, but he was like a particle on the wing of a butterfly, right? Observing, and the butterfly was flying, and he was just like a little speck in the universe, observing what is going on in front of him, but and around him, but he was on the wings of a butterfly.
Incredible. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. And butterflies are really a symbol of transformation, right? Of change. And I'm not to be too dark, but during the Holocaust, in the rooms where the Holocaust, where people were living in the barracks, there were all these pictures of butterflies right before people would be taken to the ovens. And Kubler-Ross wrote about it, that people would draw these butterflies on the walls. It was as if somehow they knew there was some, the hope for change, transformation to another world. And, and it's like the spirit, right? Butterflies are really symbolic of the spirit. So yeah, very powerful. And I think I mentioned earlier, one person saying white butterflies coming out of your mouth. They're beautiful.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah. I caught that.
Yeah, definitely.
I caught that. Today is the anniversary of the beheading of Marie Antoinette.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The guillotine, right? And so I went and looked up her last words because Well, every day I do the news live, and part of the news I do a segment, this day in history, and today it was Marie Antoinette, right? Okay, all right. So, and I thought, man, I've got Lisa Smartt on the show. What were her final words? Are you ready? The last thing she said. Okay. So now we were talking earlier about knowing, right, that somebody is okay. That's one thing, but something that is sudden is another. An accident. Well, Marie Antoinette was getting her head chopped off, so she knew. I can't imagine what is going through somebody's mind, right? As you're walking up and she tripped over the executioner's foot.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. And her last words were, pardon-moi, monsieur.
I love it. Can you imagine being so polite?
Yeah. So I thought I'd share that with you.
Oh, that's great. I'll have to put that in my memory bank. That's a great part of one. That's funny. All right.
Now, I was talking about earlier, I was asking about, did anybody have any negative parts about this? But do you think with the compilation of the data as you review it, that most were comfortable with the situation, that there wasn't any angst or I'm not ready or any of that?
Oh, I think there is definitely some of that angst, and in many cases, and most ideally, people are trying to work it out unconsciously. You'll see their dreams, they'll hear it in their language as they're kind of working out this journey they're on, or the metaphors they're using. But it seems like in most cases, or many cases, there's this kind of people break through. There is anxiety. There's definitely anxiety, but then there's kind of a breakthrough where people almost like surrender to the reality. And then there's like a blissful, more surrendering, peaceful state, right? And so it's really interesting to track people going through that process. And also when you study the dreams, I've read about the dreams of the dying, people will have the same kind of travel dreams. And at first they may be uptight about the trip, but then they get more comfortable and then they're like really happy with the trip. Or they may see the ocean and the ocean's really scary. And then suddenly they're in the ocean, they're swimming in it. And then, what a lot of people do, they start announcing a big event is coming. They can feel it, this big thing. So a very common thing is someone may say, I'm going to a big dance tonight. I'm getting ready for the big dance. And so there might be all this excitement or fear of preparation, but then people will literally say, get me my pearls, get me my dress. I want to get ready for the dance or for the big dinner tonight. One minister shared with me from one of his congregants that she was actually writing down an invite list for people. And this is another thing happens as people are dying. It's sort of, I call it hybrid nonsense. They're half in this world and half in the other world. So this one woman was like, okay, I have to invite people to the big party. And he's like, what, darling? He said, I just need to write. So she started writing down all these people. And then, a couple of days later, she was off to the big party. And I call that the momentous moment metaphor, or the momentous occasion. It's as if people know, of course, that they're dying, and when it comes and they announce it. One guy talked about the big poker game. He started talking about, and it was really funny. He was saying they had 3, they needed a 4th. And that he was going to be the 4th. Or golf. This really surprised me how many people shared that their loved one talked about, there was a golf game going on, and maybe over time they're talking about getting to the golf course, riding around, and it's a threesome and they need a 4th again. So it's just, again, we're talking metaphors, but people seem to know. And if there's fear, oftentimes they'll tell these stories or to find a way through it, right? To tell the story that's going to bring them comfort. But there often is this kind of breakthrough period. Now, sometimes when that breakthrough period happens is the time when people start not talking as much or start saying things like the butterflies or, more nonsensical, because it does seem like that when the fear goes away, there's more of that shift to the other realm.
For sure.
I know.
My mom's last words to me, and they had that week. I was flying out to see her before she passed, and they kept resuscitating her. And I'm talking to all the doctors there. Look, man, just keep her alive until I get there. I'm flying out in the morning. And I had many conversations. Every time they brought her back, I would talk to her, and she was completely loose. She was all there, right? Okay, so right before this is minutes before she passed. The show starts at 7. I talked to her at 6:30, and they just brought her back. I talked to the doctors at like 6, and they were like, "Man, we can't keep doing this." I said, "You're going to do this till I get there in the morning." All right. So anyway, I talked to her at 6:30, and these were her last words. All right. And it was short and sweet. "Jimmy, just let me go."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And she was coherent, man.
Wow.
She's like, "Man, I'm just tired. Just come on." I said, "Mom, I'm going to be there in the morning." And it happened. And so I start the show at 7. I said, "Mom, I'll see you in the morning. Okay. I've got to do the show." And I hang up. I go in, I start the show, and I knew it. And nobody told me that the hospital had called, but nobody interrupted me. And I did the show, but I knew. And she passed 5 minutes before the show started.
Oh.
Yeah.
And wow.
Just let me go.
What a great story. What a great story. Well, one of the, yeah. And one of the things I've heard over and over again is family members will be there kind of keeping vigil, but then they're all really hungry. So they're like, let's all just go out to eat. And they all go out to eat, and mom dies when they're all out to dinner.
I'm not a betting man, but my money's on that. My money's on that. You want them to go out for pizza.
No, it's really
go out for a pizza. How often does that happen? Where they know their day and time of death?
It happens a lot. People really do, and oftentimes they're anniversaries. So people will often die on maybe you'll see sometimes people hold on until their wedding anniversary or their birthday or their child's birthday, or there's some, my mother, I'm just going to share this story. I haven't shared this anyway, it's all new. It's relatively new. My mother passed away February 4th, 2023. And I had just met this great guy and he came out to meet me. We met online, and she liked him. She liked him a lot. So, and she was really close to dying. And she's like, "You got to marry him." And I'm like, "Mom, I've only known him 6 weeks online. You got to be kidding me." And that was the same one she was talking about. Herb said that someone was going to come into my life. So she said, "He's a good guy. He's got a pension. He's a musician."
He's got a pension.
Hey, come on. My mother was practical. He's got a pension.
Have you seen his 401k, Lisa?
I haven't. I love it. No, anyway. So so she said he's got a pension. Yeah. And he was like doing things around the house when he came, and he's handy around the house. You should marry him. And I'm like, "Mom, I haven't known the guy." And he was right there. He said, "She's right. I know you're the right one for me." He got down right there at my mother's bedside as she's dying and asked me to marry him. And I said, "Well, I'll get engaged. I'll get engaged." So he went out, got me a ring, which is amazing. And it was like she needed to know that I was going to be okay.
Right.
Before she would go. And what happened is we had a little ceremony at home near her bed. That night she had the stroke that killed her.
Wow.
And it was almost like she's like, "Will you please effing marry the guy so I can
Yeah.
But it was amazing. And he's turned out to be I found an amazing partner.
Yeah, it was weird that I found myself very comfortable talking to my mom about not dying yet.
Mm.
That sounds like a very crazy. How do you get into that? How does that conversation happen?
Hmm.
But it was two people, mother and son, at a very serious moment, that was like the realest conversation I ever had with her.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Jimmy, just let me go already.
Yeah.
Mom, no. I paid for plane tickets, dang it. I'm flying out tomorrow, and I've got a show to do tonight. I'll see you in the morning. All right. But it was really funny how that was a very natural conversation. But
Yeah.
those were her last words.
Wow.
And the Nostradamus. Now, whatever you think about Nostradamus, but his last words are well documented. And his last words were what we're talking about. Tomorrow, I'm not going to be here.
Right on.
And he died the next day. And that just makes me wonder if everybody gets that view, gets that understanding. They may not say it, not everybody, but that it's presented to them. It's going to be tonight. It's going to be tomorrow. It's going to be in 60 seconds. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. It's going to be in a week.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think people do have a real sense of it. I do. And oftentimes, they'll say, many times they'll wait till everybody's there, the whole family. Maybe with your mother's case, she was like, all right, let me go. But my mother referred to it as her expiration date, right? Like she had a sense of when she was going to go and she wanted to go. But, the dying, maybe take a guess. The most common word, one of the most common words that show up in the data when people are dying. Do you want to take a guess of what the most common word is? One of them is, I would say one of 5.
Sorry.
That's true. But the one, that is actually very true. That is absolutely true. Absolutely true. And the one that I was thinking of was home, because many people talk about, I'm going home. And so in terms of just let me go, because people have this sense, I talked about the travel metaphors and stuff. Well, when people talk about travel, there's this real sense that I'm going home now. Just let me go home. And sorry, absolutely. One thing we know is that people most commonly will always ask for forgiveness. I mean, at the end, people are asking for forgiveness. There's no doubt. Do you feel
Well, it makes me wonder are there confessions?
Yes.
I bet there are, right? Okay.
Common.
All right. There's 2 bodies in the backyard, right?
I don't know if they're that common. Well, but people do. There's all kinds of confessions, anywhere from one woman described how her father-in-law was really critical of her all these years, and she wasn't that pretty, but the other daughter-in-law was gorgeous, and he would kind of tease her about not being that pretty. It was just not nice. And at the very end, a few days before he died, he asked for a beer, which is very common right before people die. Sometimes they want something to eat or drink. And anyway, she got him a beer. She sat down. He said, I never realized how pretty you are. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And just simple things. It's not big, but the simple, like, oh my God, why didn't I ever see what a pretty girl you were? So just the little kinds of apologies.
Ooh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. But and that may seem like a small thing. And he could only do it with that 2 of them alone, right? He didn't want everybody.
No, that's a truth. That's a truth confessional, which is right. That's a double whammy. That's a 2 for 1.
Yeah.
Kind of like, again, I compiled a bunch of stuff. This is just coming off the top of my head. But Da Vinci did a truth confessional. His last words were, again, I'm speaking in metaphor here. I don't have it in front of me. But his last words were, I have offended both God and mankind.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That is really fascinating.
Yeah, that's heavy. That's heavy.
That's heavy. That would be one of the things Raymond and I were talking about wanting to do at some point, is maybe going through the police department and seeing what kinds of things, really being focused on the kinds of confessional things you might hear. But I think it's a really big thing, because people want to leave with peace, and at your end of your life, that's it. I mean, there's nothing. And that whole thing about the last thing people worry about is how much they succeeded, but they think more about how they loved. It's not about how much money you made, but it's about how much you loved. And that's what people care about at the end, is, did I love well, and did I love fully? And definitely forgiveness and sorry have got to be among the most common words in those last few weeks, if not the last few days.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the idea of I don't want to be in the position, and so many people are, I don't want to be in the position of getting to the end of it all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that's where I am, and that I wasted precious time on bullshit, on negativity, on fighting with hate, or any, because that's a waste, and you can't get that time back.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I don't want to be in that position, and I've already done enough of it. Right. Do you know what I mean? What was that song by, what was it, Frank? Was it Sinatra? I know Elvis did it. Regrets.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a few, but too few to mind. I don't want to be that person.
Right.
When it comes to the end, and that's when you look at the final words, is there regret, or is that some of the realization, I coulda, woulda, shoulda?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that is, you do see that, and a lot of people try to make good on it. And just like that very simple example of, I never saw how beautiful you were, or you are, there's small things. I mean, it's very rarely someone says, I'm going to buy you a house, and it's not like a big gesture of I'm sorry, but they're the small gestures that people can do. And it really seems that before we leave this world, we want to feel much like we've said as many I love yous as I can, as we can. And you look at what the life review is about, right? Raymond Moody talks about this thing, the near-death experience, where we go on the other side and we look back at all we've done to other people through the years of our lives. And we have this thing called a life review. And there's this entity, a being of light. Some people call it God. Some people call it whatever, right? It's this being, and the being is just witness. And what happens is, as you do your near-death review, or your life review, they call it, no one's judging you, but you feel directly in your gut what you've done to other people. So during the life review, it's about feeling other people's pain. So you really get what you've done to other people. And I almost get that sense as people are dying, that they start feeling more what they've done to other people. Not everyone, but one of the people who I talked to is in prison, and he works at the hospice in the prison because he felt called to do that. And the final words of the inmates, I just began collecting some of those, but those are really powerful words. And generally every guy who's in there is saying he's sorry, right? There's some exceptions. I'm not going to again sugarcoat things, but I would love to do more research. That's like, as I go on and maybe do some more research, that's one place I would love to do more research and hear more stories about what people are saying in those.
The last words at the, before the injection,
right?
The last words before the electric chair.
And again, those are, when you have last words that may be under the effect of DMT, or that may be under the effect of the dying process, those might be different than before the lethal injection, which are more calculated and thought about, and more, do you know what I mean? They're not as affected by the biological processes. Like if DMT is actually released through the dying process, let's say, then there's a kind of awareness that might be different than the kind of consciousness when someone's like, oh my God, here comes that damn, here comes the injection.
Wow,
right?
that's so profound. That's so profound. And you would expect that to be a different use of vocabulary, right? A different use of words, a different mindset. There's another process that is going on at that time, because you are very aware of the finite, right? It's not infinite anymore. And let me ask you this, and this came to me earlier. The words of somebody that is 30 years old, a 30-year-old philosophy major, right? Postdoc, right? Meaningless. Those are meaningless words. Meaningless. I don't care. I don't care what the book says. I don't care what they're writing. I don't care. The most important words ever to be spoken are the last ones. Those are the ones we need to pay attention to, right? Those are the ones we need to study. I like Moody and nonsense. That's because it is so profound, we can't wrap our head around it.
Right. And we've got to realize that when somebody starts saying, when you start hearing the kind of nonsense or the kinds of phrases that people say at end of life, I encourage people to keep their ears open and listen to it, because there's oftentimes pearls of wisdom that you might overlook otherwise, right? And, one of the things that people do right before they die often is they get disoriented. You know how they say with the near-death experience, people leave their bodies, right? So one of the things, I'm just going to read my list. So again, I'm not misquoting anyone, but you hear things like, I got to get down there. I have to go down. Help me down to earth. Help me. I'm on top now, moving on top. I'm crossing up. I'm crossing up. I've got to get off. I've got to get off. I'm dying. I'm dying. I got to get off of this life. So that whole thing we hear about the NDE, as people are dying, we actually start hearing those kinds of words. But if you're not attuned to what's going on with your loved one, if you're not attuned to the near-death experience or to the fact that their spirit might be rising, once again, you're going to be like, oh God, he's crazy. Let's just get the heck out of here. But if you could say, yeah, you're rising up, let me help you out, you can get to a conversation. One of my biggest regrets with my dad is that one day he had a pencil and he put it on his side and he was saying, I'm trying to get to the other side. I'm trying to get to the other side. And I because I didn't know this stuff yet, I just said, Dad, give me the pencil. You're going to hurt yourself. And he's like, I'm trying to get to the other. Now, if I went back in time, I'd say, what's stopping you, Dad? Tell me more about that. Tell me more about the other side, right? Now, I would now that my mind is open and my ears are open to the language of end of life, I would listen and enter. It's like entering into another world. It's like a foreign country, and you open up your ears and you start trying to get in rapport. And even the angels, darn, I wish I'd said to them what those angels look like. Isn't
that's the oldest statement in the book. Dang it, I should have asked that. Right. I get it. You're in the moment and your mind is somewhere else. His is somewhere else. And you're thinking about other things. And time machines. How do I, let's just offend everybody else here, Jimmy, tonight on the show. But the idea of that is, a romantic thought that, if I could go back, I would do it differently. Well, then that changes the course of your life. What if he describes angels to you, and then suddenly you take a left turn in life and you are not on this show tonight? Right? Now think about that, right? It's like, well, I'm going to say it. It's the butterfly effect, right?
Very good. Very
good.
Man.
I you like how I did that?
Yeah,
you like how I did that?
Very good.
But you know what I mean? You did it the right way. But dang it, I want to know what those angels look like too. Lisa, you messed up. You messed up. And here's the thing: the audience is listening and wondering the same things. They were hoping your dad did tell you what the angels look like,
Mhm.
so they could hear it. People,
Exactly.
people want to know what the inside of the flying saucer looked like, right?
Mhm.
They want to know what the aliens look like. They want to know what God looks like. They want to know what the afterlife looks like. They want to know what angels look like. Those are all of those exciting things that suddenly make the intangible tangible.
Right. And that's what's great about final words and why I really encourage people. Because again, we were talking about the icky factor when someone's dying. But, especially earlier on in the dying process, because as we've said, towards the end of life, people often become completely quiet the last few days, especially. But I really want, I'm encouraging people through my book and through my work to try to get past the icky factor and just walk in there with an open heart and open ears, because you can begin to engage in conversations with people that are pretty powerful and amazing. And, again, when I say I wish I knew now, then what I know now, you know, I'm not full of regret, but the next time I'm in that situation, with conversations with my mother, I asked her so many more questions about what was going on for her. And, I got to hear about her, and about the man I was going to marry. But I just, why I'm excited about the work that I've done, even the sustained narrative about the way there's a story that takes place over several weeks as someone's dying, and to write that whole, to track people's stories. I feel like there's so much potential for us to learn about consciousness, to connect with our loved ones, and also to feel more comfort at the end of life if we keep our mind open about the language we're hearing and not just freak out like, why does daddy keep talking about a train? There's no train here, and to keep our minds open about the metaphors. Are there metaphors of trips? Are they talking about special occasions? Are they talking about their signature metaphors? Are they talking about moving in nonsensical ways? Are they saying things like, oh man, bring me my checkbook because I have to pay at the gate? And, a lot of people are like, what the hell is she talking about? What about like, oh, you have to pay at the gate. Tell us about that gate. Here, Grandma, here's your checkbook.
Right. I got to get my ticket punched.
I got to get my
What?
ticket punched. Right. Yeah. One person was like freaking out because her husband kept saying, I need my Jetta. I need my Jetta. I need my Jetta. And she just walked out of there and said to the nurse, I can't deal with him. I don't know what he's talking about. I can't get him. So the nurse, who had a lot of experience, said, yes, sir. What is it you need? Said, I need my Jetta. And she knew that he was referring to a Volkswagen or his car, Jetta. She said, well, it's getting all gassed up for you, sir. We're gassing it up and it's almost all ready to go. And he's like, thank you. So, once she could explain to the wife, just start talking in his language. He's in a world of metaphor. You know how little kids, they have imaginary creatures. We think they're imaginary. And, we don't say to a kid, oh my God, hopefully we don't. Just get out of here. There's no such thing as a rabbit, that invisible rabbit. But we get engaged with them and we step into their world. And I feel the same thing with the dying, is that if we can step into the world and engage with them, we can get a lot of jewels out of it. And we also more comfort and more connection. But it has to happen not just at the very end. At the very end, it's rare to get that incredible phrase we might be looking for. It's usually a few days before, if not a few weeks before. But sometimes people get jewels at the end. Let me go as a jewel. Let me go as a jewel, because
Right.
maybe she gave you the gift of not being afraid of dying. That is something, that was a gift that she could say that to you.
Yeah, that's why I say to everybody, and I don't say this in a joking way. I say this in a very serious way. Only you know your secret thing. Only you. You have something that you've always dreamed about, always wanted to do. It's maybe you haven't vocalized it, maybe you haven't acted on it, maybe you're embarrassed by it, maybe you're stuck in your life or whatever. But life is short. Go and do whatever that thing is.
Mhm.
I don't care if it's knitting. I don't care if it's cutting hair, or you want to be a rocket scientist, or you want to be a pilot, or you want to be a race car driver, or you want to play the flute. Only you. Maybe you want to be a politician, right? Only you know what that is, and you're not going to be happy. You're not going to have a smile on your face in the end if you don't act on it. At least try.
Exactly.
Take a crack at it, man.
And, who wants to die with regret? I mean, that's just one thing. I don't want to die. And there are people who die with regret. I mean, even though I said people value their relationships, people do talk about, not fully living with their dreams.
I have zero. I've done everything, both legal and illegal. I'm being serious.
I believe you.
I haven't robbed a bank.
Good.
Yet.
Glad to hear that.
Okay, but that's a bucket list thing. I want to know what that's like. But taking this one step further as we close out the show. By the way, perfect conversation tonight.
That's great.
If consciousness of conversation exists outside of the body, if consciousness exists outside of the body, then what does it do? What's the next step in that? Do you go to another planet, another star system, another galaxy? Do you exist in the ether for eternity, or do you come back for another trip? Reincarnation is one word that we can use for it, but if consciousness exists outside of the body, then there must be something else to do besides just float around in space and think.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, when I look at the Afterdeath, a matter of fact, I coach people to help them write books. I'm a book coach, and I probably shouldn't give too much away, but I'm seeing more of this. She had this experience where her loved one came through in text messages. And in my book, I write about that, right? And I won't go say too much because I want to protect. Oh, yeah, we should. Anyway, you might want to interview her because she's got an amazing story. And I'm not going to give too much away. I don't want to do that because it's her book. But she's hearing, and I've heard this from other people, that people are busy on the other side. They've got tasks to do. They have things to do. There really is a sense that it is another world. And but yeah, getting back to the text message thing, when I did Words at the Threshold, at first I started doing final words, but then I kept hearing from people who track their loved ones' last words that they because they were so connected to them when they were dying, to the language, they had more after death communication with their loved ones. And there were, I think it was just 3 people in my book who got text messages at the moment of death or right after death from their loved one. And now I'm working, as I said, with a client, and I'm helping her write a book. I think it's going to be an amazing book. And she's a very credible source. I mean, she's very credible. I mean, I just completely believe her. I wouldn't work with her if I didn't. And she had that experience of getting text messages from her father. And that's all I'm going to say to protect her.
Wow, that's really cool.
But it's amazing.
What was White Noise? You remember that movie?
No, I didn't see. Where you at?
Oh, yeah, check it out. Check it out. Check out White Noise.
I will. White Noise. I'll have to wait.
Well, but there's something to be said about technology in the afterlife. And I don't know. I've been trying to make sense of this because it seems that consciousness likes electrical things.
Yeah. Well, I think there is an electrical quality.
I'm 100%. I don't understand it, right? I don't understand it, but it's the mountains of evidence that we have with that, and I have. I'll make this really quick right at the end of the show. I'm doing a ghost hunt investigation for TV. Okay. And we're at this location and we're underground in this tunnel. It's an evidence locker for a police station, right? And it's underground. It's this long hallway tunnel thing. We're down there, silence, but we have TV cameras around us and we have sound, all that's going on, but it's totally quiet down there. And we're doing EVPs. And so there's 3 of us and they have the recorder out in front. And I forget what the question is. The point is, it doesn't matter. I was a witness to this and it was dead quiet. So we ask a question. Maybe I asked it, like, to Marilyn Monroe or I don't know. But so I asked the question and we wait about 15 seconds, maybe 20, but it was dead quiet. They stopped the recorder, rewind it, and you hear me ask the question. So Marilyn, is it real blonde hair? Whatever it was, right? And they answered like clear. And for me to witness that now I don't know what's going on, Lisa.
I know,
but the phenomena is real.
It's real,
right?
I think it's real.
Yeah. That shows me that consciousness, whatever we're calling it, right? Parallel worlds, other dimensions, spirits, ghosts, whatever, consciousness, whatever, a soul, whatever it is, whatever label, you're the linguist, that we try to put on it, the phenomena is electromagnetic and knows, because it is what it is, those particles, those charged particles, our technology allows us to talk to it and communicate.
I think so. And I think do you know the book, Afterlife Frequency by Mark Anthony? But
yes.
But there really is this idea that there is a frequency. Do we have a minute for one quick story? It's a little,
absolutely. It's your show.
Yeah.
It's your show.
Just one, because this was one of the pieces of research that really changed my mind. It's by Kenneth Ring, who's a really premier researcher in near-death studies. And he studied the near-death experiences of people who were born blind, 38 of them. And guess what he found? When people had near-death experiences who were blind and they left their bodies, guess what happened? They could see. They were able to leave their bodies. They could look down. Now, they didn't have perfect vision, but they were able to see their forms. Some were able to see, something down as detailed as the tie that the doctor was wearing and describe it. So it's a slight, I shifting a little bit from your discussion about the technology and consciousness, but I had to say that because if you think, that's pretty convincing research. When you start having blind people who have NDEs who can see, it's a great book. It's called Mind Sight by Kenneth Ring and Sharon Cooper. But when that, that is this thing, right? This consciousness, what is going on and where is it living? My feeling, it's all around us. I really feel now at this time in my life, after doing this research and being with Dr. Moody and talking to literally hundreds of people now, I feel it's all around me, and if you think about some of the altered states you talk about, you don't go anywhere. I mean, just something shifts in your vibration or shifts in your chemistry that allows you to go to something that's right here, and so that's kind of my sense. I remember some people describing final words. They would say things like there were doors that they would open. One guy was talking to me. He had these 3 doors he would open in his hospital room and he could walk through them. I thought, wow, this guy was, anyway, so pretty amazing. So it's right here. It does seem to be right here. And if the blind can see when they have near-death experience, what, how can we argue that there's no such thing as consciousness?
Yeah. I mean, what does a doctor do at that moment when the patient comes back? He knows the patient is blind and the patient goes, dude, I saw you writing stuff on your notepad.
Right. Exactly.
Right. You saw what? How do you know that? Well,
Right.
I was watching. There were 6 people in the room.
Right.
She dropped some stuff on the floor and put it back on the table and didn't sanitize it. What? You saw me drop that? You saw me drop the scalpel?
That's right.
And wipe it on my, you know, this, and when an MD and some emergency room physician, right, that's living that pragmatic black and white atheist lifestyle that they tend to do, that happens. That's the eyewitness testimony that's most appreciated. Like Eben Alexander, right?
Right.
Neuroscientist, neurosurgeon, black and white world, you know, living that life. And
Amazing.
then the universe has a way of slapping you upside the head. And then right. It's that I like the doctor hospital hospital worker testimony, because they're dealing with life and death situations. Number one, they're bringing people back, right? Step back, stat, right? They're doing all of that stuff. And when somebody comes back and they describe something while they were dead, that's I think that's the life-changing stuff for those doctors, where they step back and go, there's something else going on here. And I love their testimony on this.
I agree. And there's more and more doctors coming out now. I mean, it's mainstream. You look at WebMD now, and, you know, I mean, it's mainstream. These things now are being adopted into all the conversations, more and more medically, thank goodness. And I think it's going to help all of us die better. I hope, you know, we all get more support.
Lisa, thank you so much. Where can everybody follow your work?
They can follow my work at finalwordsproject.org, and also lifeafterlife.com, Raymond Moody's website. And if anyone's interested in book coaching, you can get me at Smartt Coaching, SMARTT, coaching@gmail.com. And finally, the book is Words of the Threshold. I put a lot of love and time into it. I hope some of your listeners might want to read it.
Thank you so much. I look forward to our next conversation.
Yeah, this was
Keep doing
great.
what you're doing.
Thank
so
you.
Much fun.
You too.
Thank you, Lisa.
It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Go hang out with your ghost now. Hang out with your ghost. I'll talk to you. Bye, Lisa.
Bye. Good night.
Perfect conversation tonight. Absolutely perfect. Lisa Smartt. And now I want to remind everybody before I get out of here, her website, Final Words Project, is below over on our website and also throughout social media. Tomorrow night on the show, it's Michael Schratt. We will be talking about UFO crash retrievals. He's going to bring his favorite cases. And is it possible that our government is in possession of craft not of this earth that they are backwards engineering? We'll find out about all of that and more tomorrow night with Michael Schratt. Until then, go Backley Tappy. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go Backley Tappy.